The Tale of the Four Exiled Beings. The river stretched before me like a blackened serpent, its waters moving with a slow, purposeful churn, carving through the desolate expanse. It was a force of nature, a shadowed stream that seemed to stretch endlessly into oblivion, as though it were the very artery of the earth itself, pumping life into a land that had long since forgotten what it meant to thrive. The air was thick with the scent of decay, of history suspended in time, and the river's murmur was like the whisper of ancient gods, carrying with it the weight of 1,000 untold stories. It was a place where the fabric of reality itself felt fragile, as if it were teetering on the edge of an abyss, waiting for a single thread to break and unleash the forces that had lain dormant for eons. I stood at the river's edge, my boots sinking into the muck of a forgotten world. The water, dark as ink, moved sluggishly, like a great beast that had been wounded but not yet slain. There was a heavy, oppressive silence that seemed to hang in the air, a silence filled with ancient knowledge, as though the very river itself was waiting, holding its breath for someone who would finally awaken the forces long bound beneath its surface. I could feel it in the air, a tension that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end, as if the river were not just a body of water but a living entity, and it was watching, waiting for the one who could unlock its secrets. The river had always been a symbol of mystery, a boundary between worlds, but this particular stretch, this forsaken place, was a boundary of a different kind. It was here that the legends spoke of the four exiled beings. Four figures, once mighty and unyielding, now cast away and left to rot in the cold embrace of this river. Some said they were gods, others whispered they were demons, but in the heart of their exile, they were forgotten by all but the river itself. Their story, obscured by centuries of myth and speculation, had always drawn me in, as if it held the key to something far greater than I could ever comprehend. And tonight, as the moon hung low in the sky, casting its eerie glow on the rippling surface of the water, I knew the tale would surface once more, demanding to be told. I had spent my entire life chasing these myths, tracing their echoes through forgotten texts, through ancient ruins, through the very dust of history. I had sifted through pages worn thin by time, uncovered secrets buried beneath centuries of deceit, all in the pursuit of the truth. The truth of the four exiled ones, whose names had been lost to time, but whose power was said to be unmatched, whose very existence threatened the fragile balance of the world. These beings had been cast out, bound to the river's depths, their fate sealed by a force greater than even their own might. They were not to be remembered, not to be revered. They were to be erased, erased from history, from memory, from existence itself. But such was the nature of their power, even in exile, they lingered, their presence felt like a pulse in the very heart of the earth. As I stood there, watching the river's dark surface glisten beneath the pale moonlight, the voices of the past seemed to rise up from the water, swirling around me like an unholy wind. They were the voices of the exiled ones, their whispers calling out from the depths, carrying with them the weight of centuries, the burden of their betrayal. What had they done to deserve such a fate? What had they dared to defy, to challenge, to transcend? These questions had haunted me for as long as I could remember, and tonight, as the river churned and writhed beneath the moon's cold gaze, I knew that the answers were within my reach. For I had always known deep down, in the very marrow of my bones, that the tales, the myths, the warnings, were not just stories. They were truths, buried beneath layers of deception and time. And now, standing on the precipice of revelation, I could almost hear the ancient gods themselves stirring beneath the river's surface. They were waiting for me, waiting for the one who would unravel the truth of the four exiled ones. And when the time came, when the secrets were finally freed, there would be no turning back. Time would break, the river would surge, and the world would once again know the power of those who had been cast aside. The tale of the four exiled beings was far from over. It was just beginning. Long before the first breath of mankind stirred the air, before the stars were even given their celestial birthright to dance in the heavens, there existed a realm where beings of pure radiance thrived. These beings were not bound by the limitations of time, nor by the frailties of mortality. They were not born from the dust or the ashes but were sculpted from light itself, woven into existence by the divine hand. Their purpose was singular, their mission unyielding, to serve, to guide, to uphold the balance of the cosmos. Among them, four were set apart. Not merely because of their overwhelming power, but because of an insatiable hunger that burned deep within their cores, a hunger not for dominance, but for freedom. Freedom to choose, to rise beyond their station, to transcend the roles they had been assigned. Their names, once spoken in the sacred halls with reverence and awe, would eventually become the harbingers of a great calamity. They would be whispered as warnings, their legacy becoming nothing but echoes of defiance that resonated through the endless corridors of time. There was Drian, whose voice could summon the fury of storms and calm the most ferocious of beasts with but a whisper. His command over the elements was unrivaled, a force of nature itself. Then there was Xiphor, the ancient sage, whose wisdom surpassed the oldest stars. His mind was a labyrinth of celestial knowledge, a vast network of secrets that spanned the very fabric of creation. Next was Vajris, the warrior, a being forged in the crucible of fire and fury, the first to lift a blade not against the forces of chaos, but against his own kin. His power in battle was unmatched, yet it was his betrayal that marked the beginning of their undoing. And lastly, there was Kalian, the most enigmatic of them all. He walked between the shadows and the light, a figure of mystery whose gaze pierced the very soul. He saw too much, questioned too deeply, and in the silence of his thoughts, he found the seeds of rebellion. They were beloved, once worshipped even, as guardians of the cosmic order. Their brilliance illuminated the heavens, their names etched in the annals of divine history. But that reverence would fade, and their shining glory would be eclipsed by something far darker. For when the first seed of doubt took root in their hearts, it was but a whisper, a fleeting thought that seemed too insignificant to notice. But like an ember that falls upon dry tinder, that whisper grew. It festered and spread, igniting a flame of rebellion that could not be contained. The idea took root that they, too, should wield the power of choice, that their existence should not be confined to servitude alone, that they were more than mere instruments of a higher will. When the heavens themselves trembled in response to a divine summons, a call for order and obedience that rang through the very fabric of existence, the four of them stood defiantly, refusing to kneel. They did not fall in battle, no, their punishment was far worse. They were not slain in the glory of combat. Instead, they were cast down, stripped of their titles, their names, their radiance dimmed until they were no longer the beings they had once been. Their punishment was not death, it was a living nightmare, an eternity spent in isolation, forgotten by all except the memory of their treachery. The divine, in their infinite wisdom, chose to erase their very essence, to strip them of everything that had once defined them. They were not granted the mercy of oblivion, but forced to live as shadows of their former selves. The brilliance that had once made them gods was now reduced to nothing but the faintest glow, flickering weakly in the eternal night. Their beauty, their power, their very existence all were obliterated, replaced with something far worse than death. It was not a sentence of annihilation, it was far more insidious. Their minds, once sharp and filled with the wisdom of the cosmos, were now fragmented. Their thoughts scattered, their wills broken. They were left with only the remnants of what they had been, bound to a fate worse than death itself, a fate of eternal suffering, of eternal longing for something they could never reclaim. And yet, even in their exiled state, they carried with them a power that could not be contained. They were no longer servants of the divine, but fallen stars, their light no longer shining for others, but consumed by the darkness that now surrounded them. The tale of their creation had been one of divine purpose, of light and balance, but it had ended in betrayal, in defiance. And as their story echoed through the endless expanse of time, their names became a symbol of what could happen when the desire for freedom overwhelmed the bonds of duty. They were no longer the beings of light they had once been. They were something else now, something far darker, far more dangerous. And in the silence of their exile, the universe held its breath, waiting for the day when their power would once again awaken. The river before me was no mere stream, no simple flow of water cascading through the earth. It was an ancient, living entity, a force as old as time itself. Its waters, dark and impenetrable, had long been whispered to carry the weight of forbidden knowledge, to murmur secrets that only the boldest or most foolish dared seek. But what few knew was that beneath its murky surface lay far more than just the echoes of old myths. Beneath those waters, in the suffocating depths where the light of the sun could never penetrate, a far darker truth thrived. The river was not merely a body of water, it was a prison, an eternal cage where time lost all meaning, and the very essence of those trapped beneath its surface was shackled by forces greater than comprehension. It was here that the four once powerful beings, whose names had been sung in reverence and fear alike, had been cast into the abyss. Their punishment was not one of simple confinement, it was far more intricate, far more insidious. The chains that bound them were not of iron, but of time itself, not of metal, but of existence. These chains did not merely bind flesh, they ensnared the very soul, tethering them to a fate from which there was no escape. They were trapped not just in body, but in mind, in essence, in the very core of their being. The river was their eternal prison, and it was here that they were condemned to linger, forgotten by the world, their existence reduced to mere whispers on the wind. And beneath those endless, turbulent waves, their voices still lingered, caught in an eternal reverberation that could never fade. Drian, the once mighty voice of the heavens, whose words could command the storms and silence the earth itself, now found himself a mere shadow of his former self. His voice still echoed through the river's depths, but not in song, not in praise, not in glory. No, his cries were those of anguish and frustration, wails of restlessness that turned the very air around the river into a mournful lament. His power, once limitless, was now locked away, echoing through the endless dark in a futile attempt to break free. Xiphor, the ancient sage whose mind had once rivaled the vastness of the stars, was trapped in a visionless void, unable to touch the endless futures he had once seen. The boundless wisdom that had made him a being of legend now twisted within him, a curse rather than a gift. His mind still hungered for knowledge, for the truths that had once come to him with ease, but now they were forever beyond his grasp. He was condemned to an eternity of yearning, to endless days of seeing what could never be, understanding what would never again be his to wield. Then there was Vajres, the warrior of fury and fire, whose spirit was forged in battle and tempered in the heat of bloodshed. His was a spirit unbroken, yet eternally trapped in an unrelenting struggle. His chains, made of iron and shadow, bound him in a relentless cycle of resistance, a constant strain against the invisible forces that held him. He fought not just against his chains, but against the very essence of his own existence. His spirit burned with unyielding fire, but it was a fire that could never escape, an inferno trapped beneath the cold, oppressive weight of his punishment. Lastly, there was Kalian, the one who had walked between the worlds of light and shadow, who had seen the truth of both and understood their infinite complexity. But now, he was silent. His voice, once filled with the power to shape reality itself, was no more than a whisper carried away on the river's current. He did not cry out like Drian, nor struggle like Vajres, nor yearn like Xiphor. No, Kalian remained still, watching from the depths, his presence a shadow that lingered but never moved. He waited. Watched. Observed the slow, inevitable passing of time. But for what? That was the question no one could answer. Legends speak of their return. They speak of a time, long in the future, when the stars themselves will align in patterns forgotten by even the oldest of minds. When that moment comes, the river will dry, and the shackles that bind these fallen beings will dissolve, turning to dust as if they had never existed. But what will happen then? What will become of these exiled ones, these beings of unimaginable power and wisdom, when the chains that have held them for so long are finally broken? What will they do, now that they are free? And more importantly, what will the world do when they rise again? No one can say for certain. Some say they will rise as gods once more, their power unbridled, their vengeance swift and terrible. Others whisper that they will rise not as gods, but as shadows, their power twisted and corrupted beyond recognition. The truth of their fate lies not in the future, but in the echo of the river's dark waters. And as I stand before it now, I know one thing for sure: when the chains beneath the river are finally broken, the world will never be the same again. Some say that when the time comes for their return, it will not be as a glorious resurrection. No, they will not rise as the radiant beings they once were, shining like celestial beings made of pure light. Instead, they will return as something far more terrifying, far more twisted. Not as the servants of the divine, but as shadows cast long beneath the crushing weight of their punishment, shadows that have lived through centuries of torment and decay. Their radiance, once blinding, will have faded into the abyss, replaced by a darkness so deep, so suffocating, that even the stars may flinch at their return. This is what the whispers speak, voices trembling with fear and awe, foretelling a reckoning unlike any the world has ever known. Others, however, claim a different fate awaits them. They say that the exiled ones will be granted a final choice, a single moment in time where they must choose, to ascend once more to the heights of their former glory, or to fall into the endless void, lost and forgotten for eternity. It is a choice so powerful, so filled with the weight of existence itself, that the very fabric of the cosmos will tremble at its outcome. Will they rise, stronger than ever, reclaiming the power that was once theirs by divine right? Or will they succumb to the void, swallowed whole by the very emptiness they once feared? No one knows for certain. But one thing is clear: when their time comes, it will not be a quiet return. It will be a cataclysmic event, an awakening that shakes the heavens and the earth, echoing across time and space. As I stand at the edge of the river, its dark waters lapping at my feet, I cannot help but wonder. What are we truly witnessing? What is the truth behind the stories we tell ourselves, the stories that have been passed down through generations like sacred truths? Are we too blinded by our own biases, too entranced by the myths we've woven around these four fallen beings? Are they truly the villains of this tale, the monsters of old who dared to defy the divine order? Or were they merely the first to ask the questions that we, in our complacency, are too afraid to voice? Perhaps they were not the ones who betrayed the divine. They may have simply been the first to question it. And in that moment of doubt, in that single spark of rebellion, they were cast down and forgotten by those who wished to preserve their power. The night deepens around me, swallowing the last traces of light, and with it, the whispers from the river grow louder, more insistent. The water, ancient and eternal, carries with it the weight of secrets too vast for any mortal to comprehend. It moves ever onward, indifferent to the passage of time, to the lives it has touched and shattered. I can feel it now, in the very air around me, the presence of something long buried beneath the surface, something powerful, waiting. It is as if the river itself is holding its breath, waiting for the moment when the chains that bind the four fallen ones will finally break. When that moment arrives, everything will change. The world will never be the same again. Somewhere, deep beneath the river's surface, the forgotten souls of Drian, Zyphor, Vadres, and Kalian wait. They have waited for centuries, trapped in a prison of their own making, their fate unwritten, their return uncertain. Yet their presence is undeniable, their power lingering in the currents like an ancient, restless force. What have they become in all this time? Are they still the beings of light and purpose they once were, or have they been consumed by the very darkness that has bound them? Only time will tell. The river carries their secrets, and when the chains finally break, when the moment of their return arrives, the world will be forced to confront the truth we have long ignored. What will we find when they rise again? Will we see the heroes we once admired, or will we confront the terrifying shadows of our own unanswered questions? When the chains break, there will be no turning back. What awaits us will be a reckoning, a storm that will tear through the fabric of our understanding and reshape the world as we know it. The river has waited, and so too have they. The question now is, are we ready for what they bring with them when the time finally comes? Only the river knows, and it will not speak until the moment is right.